Welcome to Calling All Leaders, conversations with leaders for aspiring leaders. I am Brian Lassen. Joining me today, a gentleman I am all too privileged, obliged to be here, Chief Garry Hull. He is the Chief of the Gananoque Police Service, former Deputy Chief of the Port Hope Police Service. Chief, thank you so very kindly for being here today.
My great pleasure, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. So admittedly, and perhaps right off the hop here, I'd be a little bit, hard pressed to not, albeit give brief honorable mention. Certainly I shouldn't be maybe all too surprised about this as indicated by your surname, but certainly as well as there being some, policing royalty in your family, obviously in light of your current tenure, it's seemingly the case there's some hockey royalty as well as I understand it. However, for you, I guess it was Uncle Bobby and Cousin Brad, as I understand it. Tell us a bit about that.
So, yeah, obviously growing up, I had two uncles that played for the Chicago Blackhawks. So it was interesting. I found it especially interesting when I was playing minor hockey when people finally figured out who you were. I'm going to just tell you right now that it made the game even tougher because there were a lot of people out there looking to make a mark, and it didn't really matter whether I was a nephew or not. Certainly made me a little tougher, I guess, is probably the best way to describe it.
To that effect, I mean, obviously what brings us here today isn't necessarily an admiration of the game of hockey, but rather certainly the L word. And no, I'm not referring necessarily to our love and admiration, of course, of the law enforcement profession and what we do, but of course, out of the all-encompassing world of leadership. And again, I'm all too excited to sort of peel back the layers and get your insights here. But, maybe as a bit of a preamble to the conversation here, and, certainly to use a bit of an analogy, we talk about, in our career pursuits, the idea of climbing the next rung on a ladder. But I guess it's seemingly the case that you have reached the top rung, obviously, Chief being the highest successive role one can, of course, reach with the police service. And again, a huge congratulations on obviously all your pursuits and achievements. But, certainly what I'm interested about, and I would imagine everyone else, watching as well. But, as far as sort of how the succession of events went, maybe even at a high level, both, sort of all encompassing professional, personal, sort of the rise to where you are, currently, maybe you can walk us through how that sort of went to arrive where you are present day.
Sure. And you know what? I'm just about finished 36 years. And it's like yesterday that I walked to the old Port Hope Police Station on Queen Street in Port Hope for the first time. And really and truly, for me, just getting started in policing, it was an opportunity to not sit behind a desk or not do the same job every day. And I'm somewhat of a type A personality, bit of an ambulance chaser, always been intrigued by exciting events. And so the opportunity to have somebody actually pay me to get out there, roll up my sleeves and get involved in the community, whether it be the good stuff or the bad stuff, and no 2 days are ever the same, was probably the most exciting thing. And I would like to mention or preface it with the fact that I grew up on a farm just north of Port Hope, beef farm, and I think I started driving tractors when I was 6 or 7 years old. It became incumbent upon everybody that was able to do something to pull their weight. There were no sick days in farming. The work ethic becomes the first part. And once you have a solid work ethic and you know that you're dependent on, especially in a small service, to show up and relieve your people every day, then the work was fantastic. And I have to say that I was very fortunate that I was offered some opportunities early in my career, some courses to take. And I would tell anyone who's aspiring to lead in any vocation, if you're offered opportunities by the hierarchy, if you're offered opportunities by your bosses, take them. Don't ever turn an opportunity down because you feel this isn't for me or it's not in my wheelhouse. You have to take them. You have to accept those challenges, even if they're not the ones that you're looking for, and move forward. And I know as a sergeant working with a platoon in Port Hope, I have to say, from an actual police perspective, that was the best time in my career in police. Absolutely, 100%. Having a platoon, being involved in different types of operations. But the other part that you have to understand is that if you aspire to move further up, then you have to also accept the fact that moving up means that you're accepting a lot more responsibility. And ultimately, if you're not a person that is comfortable accepting responsibility, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not for everyone. And I've always maintained that the important part of the job is done by the boots on the ground. The people that sit in the offices and make decisions and create procedures and policies, um, they're there, in my estimation, they're there to support the front line, and they're there to protect and insulate those folks from harm's way. And that is, in a short fashion, that's a leader's true job, is first of all, lead by example, and secondly, provide the resources that are necessary to make sure that your people have the tools to do the job and that they're safe and they're insulated.
Interesting. So to that effect, and just because you mentioned the idea, obviously, of the sort of the topic of the day of leadership, and a couple examples of that. I mean, truly at sort of a high level, again, before we start to peel back the layers, what does leadership truly mean to Chief Garry Hull? I mean, what's sort of your take? I know it's a bit of a loaded question, but certainly that leads to maybe peeling back some layers a bit more, right?
Sure. So and quite I think transparency is a major part of leadership. The cloak and dagger stuff, the autocratic style of leadership from days gone by, that doesn't fly. I think every one of us may have at some point in time or another worked for that, what I want to refer to as the autocratic my way or the highway leader. You don't get anything accomplished. All you do is build disdain from within the ranks. You don't create an environment of high morale. And so I always looked at those situations and I was very fortunate throughout my career that I really didn't work with a lot of those people. Maybe one person comes to mind, but really you focus on what's important to you as a leader. So for me, integrity is number one. You have to have integrity in spades. Integrity takes a long time to build and a short time to lose. So it's very important that once you've built your integrity, that you keep it. If you have integrity, then you have the respect of the rank and file. The rank and file need to respect you as a leader. At the same time, you have to respect the rank and file. You have to respect the fact that they get up, put their boots on every day. They work shift work, they work weekends, they work holidays, they work weddings. So you really need to not forget where it is that you came from. And you need not to forget what it felt like some of those times, to miss some of those opportunities. And you really need to look out for not just the physical health, but the mental health and well-being of the people that are around you. And some of the ways to do that are not, and I'm going to use the term, they're not rocket science here. It's, again, my grandmother used this saying, if you don't have something nice to say about somebody, then don't say anything at all.
Sure.
You get more with honey than you do with vinegar. And you know what? Sometimes as a leader in any organization, the vinegar aspect comes out, the not so nice aspect comes out, but that's only based on a few small occasions where people have, for lack of a better word, they've made some poor decisions and they need to be corrected in the decisions that they made. But those situations are few and far between if you look at it on a broad spectrum of all the great work that the men and women in the front line do versus those few one-offs. So I always look at it from the perspective that I'm going to treat them the way that I would have liked to have been treated my whole career. I'm going to give them the respect. I'm going to get that respect in turn. I'm going to maintain my integrity, and my word is my bond. And if I give you my word, then I'm going to follow that through.
Absolutely excellent, and it's interesting that, and I'll backtrack a tiny bit because it's interesting that you mentioned the idea of morale. So I think it goes without saying, us as human beings, obviously we're certainly social creatures. We respond and react, obviously, to the the environment around us. So it's such, and still with this idea of leadership or those in this perceivable sort of leadership role, if you will. I mean, is it really the leaders that are solely responsible, for creating an environment, if you will, that's conducive, obviously, to good morale, motivation, growth, people just naturally being able to act as their natural best, and certainly wanting to wake up in the morning and come to work. Because again, we always hear about this idea, we'll sit around talking with our friends and someone may say, I love my job. And the other three people say, oh my God, you're so lucky. I mean, is there perhaps something inherently wrong with that? And how much of a role would someone, in this leadership position really have to do with that? What's kind of your take on that?
So first of all, and I want to just bring up a little story, and it happened a long time ago. I think it actually maybe happened in about 1993 or 94 at the Ontario Police College. Julian Fantino, and I think at the time Julian may have been the chief in London. I can't remember specifically, but he was giving a plenary speech to a bunch of recruits there. And I was on a use of force. I was in the first cohort of the use of force trainers in the province in 1993. And we had some time to kill. Julian was there. So we thought, you know what, let's just bump into the auditorium and let's listen to Julian Fantino. And of course, Julian comes with a lot of fanfare. He's had a storied career in policing, you know, and it doesn't matter who you talk to. You know, most people maybe didn't aspire to the things that Julian did, but at the same time, he was, in my estimation, he was a great leader. And I'll tell you what, Julian spoke for about 30 minutes. And as a person with 8 or 9 years on the job, as a sergeant of a platoon at the time myself, the guys that I was sitting with all said the same thing. We would get up and we would run through a brick wall behind that man because he inspired that confidence in you. He inspired that respect for the rank and file, the respect for the men and women on the front line. And too many times, leaders make the mistake of forgetting about what it was like. Or in some cases, they didn't actually, they weren't involved so much in the front line and the grind out there and the bullshit that goes on a daily basis and what's given back to those people from the community, because we have to remember that we're not always dealing with the best situations. We're not always placing our people in those nice, warm and fuzzy situations. There's some real shit that they have to dig into from a daily basis, and it's not fun. We need to be there to support them all of the time. And so for me, yeah, I come into work every day. And as I said, 36 years on the job, I still look forward to coming in every day. I still support the people here, whether it's civilians, auxiliaries, volunteers, whoever. And I think when I came here to Gananoque, one of the most important things that I did, and it was my wife that told me this, and she's a lot smarter than I am. She said, you need to learn every single person's name there within the first 2 weeks that you're there, because that tells those folks that they're important to you and you need to work on it. And I did that. And I won't say what some of the comments were about previous chiefs. I was one of the chiefs that really, you know, I felt pride in the organization. I looked at the people that worked here and I thought, you know what, these people are coming in every day with their chin up, and to do no less would be a disservice to those individuals. And so for me, very important to have that fervor for the job. Once you lose it, you need to step away because you're not doing anybody any favors. You're just basically putting in time, and that doesn't bode well as a leader either.
And again, just on the sentiment, I mean, you know, we've talked about the idea of filling all these different roles, and certainly the higher one gets, obviously in their succession of roles, speaking in a police service, so to speak, you know, again, we have responsible charge of the person who has responsible charge, or the person who has responsible charge for the person's doing the job, things of that nature. So I'm just wondering to sort of get your take on this. I mean, the current landscape, do you feel that we do a good job in leadership? Do you feel there's a lack of leadership? You know, in other words, are our leaders or people perceived to be leaders, are they merely sort of managing people, taking more of an authoritarian approach? And if so, I mean, to that effect, what do you feel could perhaps be done, you know, to assist our perceived leaders in turning to actual leaders that lead, so to speak? I'm not sure if you have any sort of take on that.
So I think, first of all, you need to, and I think you've already done this, Brian, and you're fully aware of this, difference between leaders and managers. Managers can learn from a book, and they can learn the policies of the service and the procedures of the service. They can look at a schedule. They can work out a budget. I mean, numbers, add, subtract, multiply, divide. I mean, budgets are no big secret. Keeping the budget in check can be challenging at times. But leaders are different individuals. Leaders are people who are forward thinking. They aren't looking at the forest right in front of their face. They're already down the road, maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years out for their organizations. And you have to have that ability to, I don't want to use the term crystal ball, because I mean, if we all have that, great, but you have to have the ability to forecast what's coming down the pipeline. What are trends in the community? What are trends in society? Where do we see those trends taking the organization? What is it that you need to do as a leader to be prepared for those things when they come? And that, when you are prepared for that, then the rank and file look to you and say, hey, you know what? Like, he isn't just some old fart that's sitting in the hall at the end of the hall. He or she have actually looked at what's coming, and they prepared our organization for that. And I think that's true in the sense of any leader. I don't think that all leaders are like that. I would like to say that all police leaders aspire to that notion that they're leaders instead of managers. And I think there's a lot more challenges now in policing for leaders than there were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, especially. And when you just look at procedures alone, and some of them are like small novels, procedures you have for your police service. And I remember when I started in 1985, most procedures were 1 or 2 pages at the most. So that's changed what the requirements are, not only as a police leader to be prepared for all of those situations, at the same time making sure that that information is conveyed out to the rank and file so that they keep themselves safe and out of harm's way. And when I say harm's way, I mean making the wrong decisions because you as the leader did not prepare those folks properly. And ultimately, a wrong decision, as far as I'm concerned, if you didn't give it or provide the information and training required, then it's on you as a police leader. And the other thing is, no, I don't think that police leaders are, in a sense, autocratic or, as I said before, my way or the highway. I think those days, I would like to think those days, at least, Brian, are long gone. They're behind us. But at the same time, I know every chief in the province of Ontario. They're all great people. They've all sacrificed a lot. I've used this analogy many times. I've seen many chiefs go into Toronto, fine-looking, in this case, fine-looking young men in their 50s. They look great. And when they come out the other side, they're ground up, they're spit out. They've been used up in that position. And it's very unfortunate that the job takes its toll on people like that. But that shows, again, the level of commitment of those folks to stay in it, to prove not only to themselves, but to the members of their service and their community that they are great leaders and they are there through thick and thin, through the good and the bad.
Excellent. Now you raise a couple interesting points about communicating to the front lines, prepping the front lines. I would imagine in a number of regards, depending on as applicable on the day, so to speak. But to that effect, and sort of in line with that, is another part of leadership, or maybe leadership in many ways unto itself. Is it about creating other leaders as well? So in other words, do we have some kind of threshold as to perhaps how far ahead we should let an employee run ahead of the herd? How much we should sort of prep them in the advancement of their career? What are your takes on that?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because when I was interviewed for the position here in 2013, the board of the day wanted to know what some of the goals and objectives that I would have coming into a small service like that. And of course, you bring what you know from previous. I mean, it's human nature to go with what you know, but at the same time, as a chief coming from an outside organization into Gananoque, I did mention to them that one of the most important things that I would try to do was to prepare and mentor somebody to compete for the job of the chief of police when I finally decided to step down. That was one of the goals that I had. Now, it's increasingly difficult in a small service because by rank structure alone, if you don't have an inspector or above, you can't take them to the OACP. You can't get them introduced into that network of persons in the OACP that will ultimately become their resource people when and should they need to rely or hook up or make a phone call, an email to get an answer to a question, like we do all the time. So, but anyways, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And in this particular situation, I resolved to the fact that I was going to make every effort for those that were interested. I was going to give them every opportunity. And when you say provide them with opportunities, there was numerous opportunities to provide it to some individuals here. And hopefully when I step away, I will have succeeded in that, and I will have prepared an individual or two to successfully compete for this position. And it's my hope that ultimately it is somebody internally, because I will tell you this, I think as organizations, we fail as organizations if we have not had the foresight to, first of all, hire the right people at the entry level, and mold those persons and provide them the education, the training, and the opportunities to see if they can carry the ball after the next leader steps down. And as large organizations and even small, if we're not able to do that, then we have failed. We have failed our community, and we have failed the people that we work with. And it says that perhaps we didn't hire the right people. In this particular case here, 100% we've hired some great people in Gananoque. And I do want to say to that end that probably one of the most exciting things for me still today is getting the new recruit, signing them up, and giving them an opportunity that somebody gave me in April of 1985. They had the faith in me, say, you know what, we're going to give you the opportunity. And to me, that is still the most rewarding thing, is having that young person in. And it's not always young, but in any event, and signing them up on the dotted line and having the look on their face. And when you hand them that badge for the first time, there's no feeling like it.
I got you. Well, Chief, I tell you what, you've obviously been very, very diligent and gracious with your time here. So maybe just in the interest of mindfulness, of course, of your time, and to wrap up, because obviously a lot of great points and some very articulate answers here. So maybe just in sort of, summation here, do you have perhaps any all-encompassing insights or advice for those who are striving to realize, perceivably leadership roles, climb the next rung on the ladder, and, certainly to realize successive, more senior roles?
Sure. Excuse me, Brian. So first of all, never forget where you came from. Never forget. And I mean that in the sense of policing. We all come from different backgrounds, but once you get your foot through the door and you're a police officer, never forget where you came from as you move up through the ranks, and never forget what it felt like in all situations. Secondly, there's no harm in taking courses on your own time. The police service shouldn't be responsible for providing all the education. And I know for myself, I took different community college courses. Computers were new, Excel spreadsheets were new. Like you need to be prepared for those opportunities when they come up, to have that leg up on, say, the person that's sitting next to you that's competing for the same job. And secondly, never lose your empathy and compassion for your fellow officers, regardless of their plight in life. And I think police officers especially are really quick to judge sometimes, and even about their fellow coppers. And I think, and I've often said this, we've all had situations where everybody is struggling with different issues personally. They're still coming to work. We always need to be cognizant of that. And as I've said, don't pass judgment or opinion until you've walked in that person's shoes. It's really important for you to understand what that person's going through. And that's all part of the respect. That's all part of the whole process of having that compassion and empathy. And I think probably most importantly, I go back to integrity. You have it, you earned it. Don't ever let anybody take it away from you. And if you have that, and you have the respect and you have the compassion, you will be a great police leader on those three merits alone, because you won't make those mistakes. You won't make those rash decisions. You will think things through and do what's best for the organization and for the member, not what's best for you as the chief of police.
Excellent words to live by. Well, Chief Garry Hull of the Gananoque Police Service, I thank you so very kindly for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to speak with you, get your insights, and I'm certain everyone watching this is going to get a lot of that as well. And of course, we extend our huge thanks and admiration for all the great work that, of course, all our policing folks are doing, especially amidst the current dynamic landscape of the coronavirus pandemic. I think that goes without saying. So, Chief, again, I thank you so very kindly for your time.
All right. Thank you for having me, Brian. All the best.